Mm-hmm. Okay, I will try this. Mm-hmm.
We can see your screen. Why don't you just activate the window you want to share? Then we'll be able to see exactly what you want to share. We're currently seeing just the browser from your computer.
I will try.
Yeah.
I had it up, but now I need
to... Maybe you can minimize this browser and maybe your application.
Yeah, that's
will come
what
up.
I need to. Is that
Are
over
you?
there?
Are you? Yeah.
Or there? No. How do I minimize this one?
It's on the right side.
On the browser. What application are you sharing? Are you sharing a PowerPoint or a PDF?
Yeah, the PowerPoint.
But okay, it's on the right side.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, I got them there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see them.
Yes. You can just now do
Like
this on the slideshow. Yeah. Thank you. Perfect.
Okay. Then I can stop share.
No, don't stop sharing. Then it'll stop. Just go back to the presentation mode. Just now, before this, you had a presentation mode, so that we get it in a full screen. Yeah. No, just from the below on the PowerPoint, there is the presentation mode just before the slider where you minimize it or increase it, or you can go to.
I can do this. And which one here?
There is there's an item called slideshow on the same toolbar, right? After animator. No, on the red bar. Don't go to the browser. Please make your cursor down on the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a.
I take it down like this. Okay. I don't know what this is. I will mute myself.
I think we start.
Yes.
Okay. Well, good morning to our guests from Denmark, Professor Lundvall, and other participants who are joining us from Denmark. Good afternoon to our participants from India, and good evening to our research friends and professors who are joining us from China and other parts of the world. My name is Sheikh Fayaz Ahmed. I work with Professor Xiaobo at the School of Management at Zhejiang University in China. Indeed, I'm absolutely thrilled and honored to moderate today's public talk, Economics of Hope, Revisiting the Theory of Innovation System for a Post-Pandemic World, with two important guests, Professor Lundvall and Professor Xiaobo, who is joining us from Zhejiang University School of Management. Professor Ball, we call him in short. He doesn't, of course, require an introduction, but I'll try to briefly do him justice. Professor Lundvall is a professor emeritus at Aalborg University's Business School, Denmark. He is the founder of Global Research Network on Innovation and Competence Building, popularly known as GlobalX. His research is about the management and economics of innovation and knowledge. He established the concept of learning economy with Professor Johnson and introduced the concept of National Innovation System with Professor Chris Freeman. He is a top-ranking and hugely cited professor. Professor Ball started his academic career at University of Gothenburg as assistant professor in 1969. In 1973, he moved to Aalborg University, where he was appointed as associate professor. From 1992 till 1995, he was deputy director at OECD, a group of very rich countries. And since 1995, he is professor at Department of Business and Management at Aalborg University, where he founded IK Group in 1977. Professor Lundvall was involved in the organization of Aalborg University during 1977. However, a turning point in his career, according to one of the websites, was his visit to Supru, United Kingdom, and Stanford, US in 1984. He was invited to become a special invited professor at Tsinghua University in Beijing in 2004-2006, and to become visiting professor at Sciences Po at Paris 2007 and 2010. According to research carried by Professor Fagerberg and his colleagues on innovation studies, Professor Lundvall is number 4 in the most important sources of scholarly inspiration, only after Professor Schumpeter, Professor Nelson, and Professor Lundvall's mentor, Professor Freeman. His work has been cited over more than 60,000 times, and hundreds of PhDs have been written around the world about his concept of national innovation system and learning economy. His popular books include The Learning Economy and Economics of Hope, which was published by Anthem Press in 2006 in London. Innovation, Growth and Social Cohesion, which was published by Belger in 2002. The Globalizing Economy, which was published by Oxford University Press in 2001. National Innovation Towards the Theory of Innovation and Interactive Learning, published in 1992. And Product Innovation and User-Producer Interaction, it was published in 1985. On behalf of National Institute of Technology, Kashmir and Zhejiang University, I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude to Professor Ball for agreeing to join this public lecture. We had to wait a lot. I think from the last 6 months, we had to wait for Professor Ball to join this discussion. And finally, he was able to steal a slot from his highly busy schedule. Thank you, Professor Ball, for agreeing to join this public talk. I would also like to say thanks to Zhejiang University for offering the support which is needed to organize this important event. I'm really grateful to Professor Xiaobo for joining this public lecture. Professor Wu is a senior professor of innovation and strategic management at Zhejiang University, one of the top universities of China. His outstanding achievements in innovation and entrepreneurship research earned prestigious Changjiang Scholar Professor by China's Minister of Education. Professor Wu serves as Dean of the Faculty of Social Science and Director of National Institute of Management and Academy of Global Zhejiang Entrepreneurs at Zhejiang University. He is also the Director of Joint Research Center for Global Manufacturing and Innovation Management, set up by Zhejiang University and Cambridge University. Professor Wu was appointed Senior Vice President of International Council for Small Business in 2012 and is Vice President of the Central and East European Management Development Association. Professor Wu studied at Zhejiang, the Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand, Judge Institute of Management Studies at Cambridge University in UK, and was Fulbright Scholar in Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the US in 2000-2001. His recent book on Huawei was published by Cambridge University Press. Besides teaching and researching technological innovations at Zhejiang University, Professor Wu is an innovation advisor and a board member of leading companies, including Geely, Siemens, China, Hikvision, and many other innovative Chinese firms. Thank you, Professor Wu, from Zhejiang. And our chief discussant is Shagufta Hanif. She is a PhD student at Aalborg University School, Denmark. She has been part of the IK research group at School Aalborg University since 2013 and served GlobalX Secretariat, Africa Leaks activities in Denmark between 2013 and 17. She is currently writing the role of universities for inclusive development. We'll be also joined by Professor Saad, who is IID Center, NIT Srinagar. Before I ask Saad Parvez, head IID NIT Srinagar, to give a formal welcome, let me quickly set the scene for today's public lecture. Well, we all know that the wealth of nations is directly linked to a thriving innovation culture. A lack of innovation merely paves way to, creates a road which leads to poverty and serfdom. Many economic historians argue that, the so-called innovationism has enabled many formal poor and ignorant people to flourish. In fact, Professor Edmund Phelps would say that the mass flourishing of ideas in some spaces and lack of it in other explains the disparity which exists between the haves and have-nots. So innovation is seen as directly linked to prosperity, wealth, and power of nations. Yet the wealth inequality, stagflation, environmental disasters, and middle-income traps resulting from the recent recessions have brought to light the weak innovation growth models. Inequality is reaching levels not seen before 19th century, while the rates of the productive enhancing innovation also comes down. It's slow. Climate change disasters and COVID-19 like pandemics are threatening the global prosperity as well. As indicated by Professor Lundvall, innovation is usually seen as a first world activity. And unfortunately, the number of poor people living in the extreme poverty has increased despite growing wealth. In fact, 2 days back, there was a report published in Nature, which tells us that most of the development scholars are in Europe, and the number of the development scholars studying poverty, wealth is less compared to global north. So there is a clear issue at hand here. Current innovation models seem dysfunctional given the magnitude of the world problem. Take COVID as an example. The pandemic has exposed the top-down elitist models of governance and growth. Developed and developing countries have suffered due to unsustainable innovation models or unsuitable innovation models. And a policy cry for appraisal of the dominant innovation and growth models has come to the fore. Researchers have called for reshaping innovation models to tackle current failures. Even experts of the United Nations have started advocating for a hybrid models of innovation to address global concerns of poverty, inequality, and climate change. The demand for more democratized models of innovation is growing in kind. With these changes, development scholars have begun to pay close attention to alternative forms of innovations. Considering these issues, last year we started a lecture series on rethinking innovation and growth models in post-COVID world. We were joined by well-known development and innovation professors from MIT, Harvard, Erasmus, Oxford, Imperial, and ZJU. More notably, we had an equal participation from Global South. Professor Mohammed Yunus, Professor Xiaobo, Dr. Bahaduri, Professor Mamo, Dr. Tiran. They all joined and they offered a Southern perspective about the need to rethink innovation and development models. In fact, we have also circulated a call for a special issue on the same theme for SAGE's Journal of Science, Technology and Society. The issue is due in March 2022. And we have conceptualized a workshop which will be taking place in Zhejiang University, China by the end of this year. Today, we'll be taking the discussion forward in examining the economics of hope by revisiting the theory of innovation system for a post-pandemic world. And we'll be also discussing the role of secondary innovations in a post-COVID world. And this perspective will be offered by. Without taking much time, I would quickly like to invite Professor Saad Parvez, who is head IID NIT Center, to offer a formal welcome note to our guest speakers, Professor Bal and Professor Xiaobo and Dr. Shugufta, and the participants who are joining us from different parts of the world. Professor Saad Parvez.
Thank you, Dr. Fayaz. Am I audible, Dr. Fayaz?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and welcome. I'm highly privileged and honored to have Professor Lundvall and Professor Xiaobo with us this afternoon. I welcome all the participants, all the eminent professors, and my friends to this talk. Well, I am Saad Parvez. I'm heading a center which we call as the Innovation, Incubation, and Entrepreneurship Development Center at the National Institute of Technology, Srinagar. Well, NIT, which we call as the National Institute of Technology, is a technical institute of national importance in the region of Jammu and Kashmir and is one of the premium technical institutes of India. The institute was is one of the first 8 regional engineering colleges which were established in 1960s by the government of India. And then in 2003, the institute was converted to the National Institute of Technology by the Ministry of Human Resources and Development, Government of India, as an institute of national importance. We have been imparting quality education since the inception of the institute by focusing on technical advancements and research. The institute offers courses in 8 different engineering disciplines. Besides BTech courses, the institute is also offering many master's level courses, MSc and PhD programs in various disciplines of engineering and sciences. Well, the Innovation, Incubation and Entrepreneurship Development Center, we call it as the IIED Center of NIT Srinagar, was established lately in the year 2016. So we are very young as far as innovations are concerned. The aim of establishing this center was to coordinate and leverage through innovation, incubations and entrepreneurship and ecosystem, fostering a culture of cutting-edge technology, making NIT Srinagar the harbinger of innovations in the northern part of India, which is the Jammu and Kashmir. It's a UT Union Territory presently. Well, in the sectors of science and technology, with emphasis on national growth and social upliftment, and of course, problem solving. The mission of this center is to promote a vibrant, innovative and entrepreneurial environment with an aim to develop knowledge economy. It also tries to create and develop a sustainable, globally competitive facility that contributes towards the accelerated economic growth of the region by identifying, exploring and developing regional competitiveness. We also are trying to strengthen the institute industry linkage and to formulate collaborations and collaborative ventures with the business communities of the region, in particular the region as a whole, and in general the nation. We are also trying to assist and develop new businesses, startups, trying to create jobs and employment generation in specific sectors that are aligned with the region's unique areas of opportunity. In this background, we have also launched a 2 years postgraduate course, which we had called as the TIDE, Technology Innovations and Entrepreneurship Dynamics, and we have renamed it presently in this semester as Masters in Technology Innovations and Entrepreneurship Management. Well, the aim of this course is to overcome the knowledge deficit and supply the trained manpower required for a sustainable and inclusive economic ecosystem. We are also trying to help answer very important questions like what is the significance of science and technology and innovations in the context like a Himalayan region of Jammu and Kashmir, how formal and informal knowledge system can be united, and it can lead to new business models, how traditional and cultural artifacts and modern technology and innovations can blend to open new avenues of industrial and entrepreneurship dynamics, and of course how to differentiate how do different types of firm organizes their innovation activities, whether we are talking about running new businesses, whether we are talking about working in innovation environment, or we're talking about consultants. So these are some of the questions which we are trying to address through this course. It's an MSc program in technology, innovations, and entrepreneurship dynamics. It also deals with other paradigms of innovations also. Okay, so we are looking for your active support, mentoring, and guidance, so that we are connected through a common language, and that language is the language of innovations. So with those words, I welcome everyone, all the eminent professors, and I hope that this would be a real value addition to all the participants who have joined us this afternoon. So thank you very much. Over to you, Fayaz.
Thank you, Professor Saad Parvez. I again welcome you all to this exciting session today afternoon. I also welcome Professor Krishna. He was chairperson, Center for Study in Science Policy, and has been my teacher. He is joining us from Australia. He is Editor in Chief of Science, Technology and Society. So now, without wasting much time, I invite Professor Lundvall. He'll be speaking for 30 minutes, and then Professor Xiaobo will be speaking for 30 minutes. And then we will have discussion comment from Shugupta for 10 minutes, and then we will have question answer session at the end. Professor Lundvall.
Thank you very much. I will try to see if you can see my. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
You can see my screen. I will try to see if I can get this one here. Just a minute. I'll do this. So, can you see it now?
Yeah, perfect.
It's okay?
It's perfect.
So, I need to minimize this one. So, now I will go up. So, thanks a lot for inviting me, and also thanks to the very interesting introduction which we just had. I'm going to try to follow the heading of my lecture, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity also to reconnect with Xiaobo, who I have missed quite a lot. He's a great colleague and friend. Is there a problem with the sound? No?
It's clear. I request.
It's okay.
Please
So we are going to talk post-COVID, but one of my... There's somebody speaking. I think people should mute. I don't know. My first point is to say that we are not completely post-COVID yet. It's not completely over. Second, I will speak about the innovation system, not only as a theoretical, but also as a historical and policy concept. So one of my points is that, which I will make, is that theoretically, we might need to revise some fundamental aspects of the concept, because COVID-19 has accelerated the second phase of the ITC revolution, the information technology revolution. And I will raise, somewhat speculatively, if we need to add a new mode of innovation. We already have this distinction between DUI and SDI, and are we now getting also a kind of new artificial intelligence digital mode of innovation? Also, I think that the COVID has made much more clear the extreme differences between the North and the South, and perhaps it raises the issue about the need to, what I call, decolonize some of the theories and concepts. For instance, we can see that the state plays completely different roles. Historically, I will point to deglobalization and to the technology war between China and the US as a new important new condition for innovation systems all over the world. It's been on its way, but both things has been reinforced by the COVID-19. And third, in terms of innovation policy, I think we need to rethink fundamental issues related to intellectual property rights and antitrust policy. I mean, with the tech giants and with big corporations challenging national systems, I think the old way of looking at these things might need a radical change. I'm going to talk from the perspective that the future is imminent in the current situation, but at the same time, it can be shaped by human action. If we look at how things are, you might get quite pessimistic. And I hear, and I will come back to that, I quote Gramsci, who talks about the pessimism of the intellect and the optimism of the will. Now, there's somebody speaking again. I think you need to mute. COVID is not over yet. Still, actually, around 10,000 every day die from this disease at the global level. And there is a lot of uncertainty on what is going to happen in the future. The security offered by vaccines is uncertain because they're all the time emerging new variants with increased transmissibility, more virulence, and decrease in effectiveness of vaccines and therapeutics. So in a sense, it's too early to talk about post-COVID. Things might still happen which can change some of the patterns we have seen so far. If we look at one aspect of this, you have had a vaccine rush where you had commendable world openness on the character of the illness, making it in principle possible for every business to engage in developing vaccines. But it was immediately followed by a very problematic where small handful of big pharma companies were the ones who had the resource to develop the vaccine. Of intellectual capital. I'm going to refer to something I call the citizen privilege. Already before COVID, the place of birth was the most important single factor determining your future living conditions. It makes a major difference if you are born in Denmark or in Uganda or in Pakistan or in somewhere in Latin America. With COVID, it became even worse because it became an issue of life and death, as the rich countries monopolized vaccine production and hoarded vaccines, leaving very small possibilities for countries with limited resources and no production by themselves. So I think this raises a very fundamental issue about citizenship. And I know that Ake and Held wrote interesting things about this, 2011. I think they call it cosmopolitan citizenship. And at the same time, you can say in general the focus moved towards much stronger emphasis on national innovation system. The most fundamental contradiction in this COVID-19 thing is thus that COVID-19 has led to a strengthening of nationalist strategies. My country first has become a general slogan, and systems of production and innovation have become more oriented toward national objectives. And this is true not only of national policies, but even private companies have been more mobilized to cover the needs of their own citizens rather than operating globally. But at the same time, we can see that COVID-19 has demonstrated the limitations of national action. Because when it comes to tackle what is truly global crisis. I mean, we never had a crisis that global before because everybody, independent of where you were located, was hit and affected by it. And what I said before, it's not over yet. And it's obvious there is a need for new forms of global governance. One point I would like to make is that some global trends which were there before COVID were reinforced and accelerated. One of those is a tendency towards deglobalization. Actually, global value chain trade started to shrink already around 2010. To some degree, this had to do with the reorientation of the Chinese system, where you got more focused on national production chains rather than global ones. With COVID, we also got a strong reduction in the international mobility of people. So you have deglobalization in several different dimensions. But at the same time, we got another type of globalization. We see rapid increase in international trade in digital services. And this is driven especially by tech giants in the US, some degree Chinese, but to a lesser degree Chinese agents. And COVID accelerated their growth, including their growth in market value. The share prices of the tech giants have accelerated in connection with COVID-19. And artificial intelligence has been taken the place of a strategic technology, which is key to economic progress and security. And it's reflected in a technology war between the US and China. And this is something, again, which was on its way before COVID-19, but both the technology war and the Cold War between China and the US became intensified by the COVID. So innovation system, as I mentioned, is a theoretical and historical concept. It is theoretical in the sense that it brings together theoretical concepts which are based on empirical insights from innovation studies on how innovation takes place. I can mention the role of interaction between firms, between universities and firms, the general idea of interactive learning. I can also mention the role of different modes of learning, like experience-based learning, or DUI, or science-based learning like SDI. But it's also historical in the sense that it studies these general patterns in specific contexts of time and space. The role of enterprises, the role of universities, and the role of the state is quite different across spatial geography and across time. I would argue that COVID-19 has put some kind of stronger focus on the very fundamental differences between the North and South in modes of innovation and in the role of the state, for instance, and therefore it makes it even more important to further develop concepts which have been developed mainly in the most developed countries in the West, and to do what some sociologists refer to as decolonize the theories. So let's take the heading, Revisiting Innovation System Theory, literally. And here I would say one of the interesting issues which I think research should address is if we are moving towards a situation where we get a new mode of innovation besides SDI and DUI. I don't think those will disappear, but I think we might recognize that we got a third mode, which is based on artificial intelligence and machine learning. Some of the key authors on artificial intelligence have referred to it as the invention of a method of invention. And we might develop something we call an AID mode, which would be something with artificial intelligence and digital. Another thing is that we might see more and more transformation of human interaction. I worked a lot with user-producer interaction, and now the kind of feedback from people mainly takes the form of data. People become some kind of guinea pigs, delivering data through their actions and choices. And you can perhaps end up with something we could call the everyday as a laboratory. And this includes education, health, and culture. And this is to compare with Chris Freeman's concept, which had more to do with manufacturing, where he talks about the factory as a laboratory. And all this poses dramatic threats, but also great opportunities, depending on how we organize our society. So if we start with the pessimism of the intellect, there are many things which are extremely worrying in the post-COVID area. Both COVID-19 and the current direction of use of artificial intelligence tend to aggravate global inequality. And COVID-19 gave rise to techno-nationalist strategies with a technology race between US and China. There's a risk to divide the world in two spheres of innovation and or even an increasing risk for war. The accelerated development of artificial intelligence is primarily directed toward enriching the richest people in the world. And global intellectual monopolies challenge nation states. And finally, artificial intelligence gives new means for the state to control their citizens. So if we want to talk about the economics of hope, of course, we are in the midst of the second wave of the ICT revolution, where artificial intelligence and machine learning offers radically new solutions, both to social, ecological, and human problems. And COVID-19 actually accelerated the development of these technologies and also their applications in health, commerce, and education. So there are great opportunities if we can find the right way to organize the development and use of these technologies. I would say that COVID-19 can be seen as a stress test. I don't know if you know this concept, but it's used to test banks, for instance, if they can stand against the financial crisis. And it was a stress test of the current world system, including the global production and innovation system. You can say it was a test to see if the systems are fit to tackle the problems which we know will come emerging in the Anthropocene, where people have, in a sense, taken to total control, but thereby brought a lot of imbalances into the natural system, including global warming. And the test result so far is negative. It demonstrates fundamental system deficiencies. And COVID also tested national systems of health. Many national systems failed in this test. And who can fix it? This will be my last three slides. I hope I haven't taken too long already, have I? Okay, I assume not. So let's start with the market mechanism. I think it turned out to work quite slowly. And when it responded to COVID, it reinforced inequality. One thing what happened was that the just-in-time global production system turned out to be highly problematic, since there were acute need for products produced abroad. And we can see a new turn toward what can be called just-in-case production systems. With some more reserves and a lower degree of globalization. So, third, markets allowed the formation of intellectual monopolies. Big pharma could make a lot of profit for their owners by making use of knowledge financed by taxpayers, and hereby the rich got even richer. I think there is a need, as I mentioned before, for a reassessment of intellectual property rights and antitrust regulation, because tech giants are different. I mean, it's not like a small entrepreneurial firm who need to have protection. They need to be regulated in a different way. But of course, market mechanisms remain a useful governance form if they are applied selectively. So let's look at the state. We can see that the state was forced to act in different ways. It was forced to try to stop the spread of the COVID. It need to speed up treatments, including vaccination. And it was also much directly active in SDI policy, industrial policy, to respond to new challenges. And finally, a very dramatic change in economic policy, massive quantitative easing of money, never seen before. But the actions demonstrated enormous differences in the different states' resources and capabilities. In some cases, it demonstrated corrupt states and abuse of power. There's somebody who is unmuted, I think. In all countries, the state reduced human rights, but we found different approaches. In the era of COVID and artificial intelligence, there is a fine balance between legitimate control and totalitarian control, and not all states respected this fine balance. Anyhow, we could see the end of neoliberal ideology. In the United States, the state has entered massively and directly into the innovation race with China. Nobody really argues that the market could do what they want to have done. So this is my last slide. I see many examples of civic actions of solidarity within nation states, where the aim has been to help those most exposed to COVID-19. And another thing which is happening, which is very important, is that scientific evidence of climate change has brought the issue on the political agenda everywhere. Nobody can anymore neglect that there is a need for some kind of global action. And there's a growing consciousness, especially among young people, that the problems are global and that the current trajectories of economic growth are unsustainable. There is something called tipping points in the discussion of the climate. Perhaps we should look for political tipping points, where when the gap between what needs to be done and what actually gets done become glaringly big, we might be optimistic and look for a tipping. I think what I look for very much in the future is a formation of global civil society organizations which are transnational, which can become democratic foundations for new forms of global governance. We have seen a lot of globalization from above, which has not been beneficial for our world, but what we need now is globalization from below. And I see globalists as a small but very important contribution in this respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Lundvall, for this exciting presentation. Wonderful way forward suggestions. Now I would request Professor Xiaobo. He's joining us from Zhejiang University. Basically, when we are discussing these alternative innovation forms, so one of the wonderful pathway is second innovations. And tomorrow I'm joining a session at the United Nations General Assembly and probably the science summit of that. And one pathway I'm discussing is second innovation, because I have been studying second innovation for the last couple of years, and I find it kind of appropriate for the countries who are dealing with these institutional voids and resource constraints. I think less resources are required when research is required. So I think that's one pathway which probably could be experimented in post in countries post-COVID world. So I want to request Professor Xiaobo to please enlighten us about the secondary innovations and what will be the role and significant secondary innovations once the COVID period is over. Professor Xiaobo. Professor Wu, can you hear me? Professor Wu. Professor Wu, can you hear us? Yes.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Professor Wu.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I just temporal jot down. Yeah. Anyway, so I heard most of Professor Ball's lecture. Yeah. So I will share my view, my slides at first. Yeah.
All right.
That's forbidden to share. It's forbidden to share my slides here. Yeah. You should
Okay.
let me share the slides.
Okay, all right.
Should let me as one of the hosts so I can share my slides.
Just a minute, Prof.
Actually, Professor Ball's view, mostly I agree with. Actually, the COVID-19, surely that's the stress test, yeah, for most of the programs, especially for the innovation systems. Okay, so I can share it right now. Yeah. Okay, so every people can see it.
Yes, yes, Prof. And I request
Okay.
participants to get off the mics. Okay, Prof.
I will shut my speech, so maybe then 20. So as mentioned by Professor Ball, the new economics of hope, that's very nice words. Actually, Professor Ball has a new book on this. And my topic here, I talk about the so-called inclusive innovation, especially for the developing nations. I will talk about some lessons from BOP entrepreneurship in China, especially. It's the Mid-Autumn Festival in China with this time to addressing something. Okay, we'll divide. It's job done.
Yes, Prof. There was some technical issue from
Is
your
it okay
side.
now?
We can hear you now, but the slide is not visible. Okay, you start sharing the screens.
Okay. 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 Can you see the slides?
Not Professor. Yes, now we can see the slides.
I start the share screen.
Yes, yes, we can see it.
Can you see them now? Okay. Okay. the question, we see that some technological problems. Is that okay, Fayed?
We can hear you, bro.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Professor. Wait for a few minutes for Professor Xiaobo. I think there is some technical issue from their side.
I'm sorry, that's the technical problems here. Fayed, is that okay now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Prof. But
Hello,
yes, we can hear you.
Fayed.
Yeah, can you hear me, Professor?
Okay. Okay, I see that the internet is not so steady here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the technical issue from China.
Yes, that's okay.
Your voice is clear now, but I can't see the slides.
That's okay. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, the slides are visible now.
Sake, is okay?
Yes, it's okay. It's fine, bro.
Okay. So I will mention about the problem, the BP, the limitations actually. Yeah. So how to go through this market limitations? That's the key issues. Ability constraints and the geographical disadvantages and the lack of fund. That's the main. There's three key problems here. Yeah. So with this, in the words, we see the different the rules, the liberal rules of the BOP. With these charts that's provided by the World Bank, we could see that the China and some other nations, most of the countries for the BOP people, they are not so much active in the world, in society. But anyway, in China, in last 20 years, make a big efforts to reduce the poverty. And now we see almost with for this, which I should mention here, internet-based giants, we see those platforms help the poor people, especially the farmers, to get some advantages with the new technology platforms. So we can have decode, reduce those things. We see the information separation and spatial separation and the financial new village people. So we could see that in China, we see such as the Alibaba, they provide funding for the Taobao villages, spread those small internet terminals to help the poor people in the villages to achieve a lot. So I should say that that's something related with the inclusive innovation systems. So when we're thinking the innovation systems, we should think about the inclusive innovation systems. So always the gap, in 4 dimensions, you could see the technology gap and the industry upgrading gap, and also the income gap. And then we could see the theoretical framework and the policy guidance also we are facing the gaps. So with this, we could see that most of the current scientific policies, technology policy, and innovation policy, mostly targeting those people. We could see a lot of mostly very important roles. So we see that in this world, so many people in the poverty. So how to help them, to let them have the capability to do something worthwhile, that's important. So we see the inclusive development is so important. So most people targeting the fair opportunities and the fair sharing, but we see the fair and the capable participating might be most important. With this, we could see the innovations could be made by those BOP entrepreneur, inclusive building, what I mentioned. And another dimensions, we see the acquisition of the opportunity and especially participation. And the fairness of the outcome sharing also important. But the most thing, we see the barrier remove and the fairness of institution is most important. So in this way, we could see the rule of inclusive innovations as shown with this chart. We see. So especially in those mostly innovation, frugal innovations, cost of the lower the standard. So we see the downgrade. But in China, mostly people emphasizing the secondary innovation. We made innovation with the local resource and the local, especially we see the process innovations to improve it. But we try to upgrade the standard. So that's 2 kinds of the inclusive innovations is undertaking in developing nations. Yeah. But especially in China, we see that's secondary innovation, very important role. So yeah, provide a lot of elements into this opportunity for economy, and it's very important because the limit of time, I couldn't addressing it in the detail. Yeah, but anyway, that's the framework here. And different series addressing those issues. We see the formal economy, we see the opportunity and the diagnose constraints and enable access and the efficient usage. So we see that's addressing the inclusive innovations with different series, resource, transaction cost, and social cognition, social and organizational network, and institutional arrangements. So all those series addressing the inclusive development, but not so sufficient. So we need the new framework to rethinking our innovation systems. So let me address something about the secondary innovation here. So we say as a poor society couldn't compete with those rich society because they have a strong power to with those giants. That's why continue to be poor. So how to tackle with these problems? So for the innovation at the micro level, at the firm's level, we see that formerly developing nations, we cannot study innovation with the product innovation mostly. So at the first, we acquired the technology, mature technology, into the domestic mass innovation first, then product innovation. So that's the different dynamics in the developing nations. We see that. But we see that the technology has its paradigm. So when we try to learn, try to catch up with the frontiers, we're following the formal way. So it's not so easy to jumping from one paradigm to the next paradigm. So that's why for most of the nations, developing nations, it's not easy because the developed nation always heading the next paradigm. So that's the key questions here. So as the latecomers, we have the advantages in the learning, but we have the disadvantages for the shifting of the technology paradigm. So that's the big problems. So how to upgrade, that's the key issues. From the latecomer to the second mover, and some of them may be the first movers, not so easy. But mostly we are here for the poor nations developing our innovation capabilities. And in this way, we see that we have different learning modes, the adaptive and the maintenance and development. And we see the transitional learning is the most difficult time for the developing nations, developing societies. So that's a lot of lessons we could be learned from the practice in China. We see that the changing force of economic power, as mentioned by Professor Ball, we see the artificial intelligence and the internet. So we see in China, mostly with operate power is at different layers. But later on, we see that with the free market, more and more people can be involved in the market competition to grow up their businesses, yeah, based on the core competence. But we could say that those technology-intensive companies, they dominating the vertical market there. But now we see that the new platforms are rising. So we see the grassroots rising. So we see the inclusive innovations and not just the product, but also the services developed very, very fast. So in China, the main reason for China's catch up successfully, we see that we catch up not just following the original way. We have the new path that's enabled and empowered by the internet, and also we see artificial intelligence and some other very good, we see the new technology to support those small medium-sized and the micro firms. Yeah. So we see that the infrastructure is so important. So in China now, more than 3 billion smartphones in the using, and also more than 30 billion connected terminals right now. So I should end here. So we see the hope of the BOP, hope, I think, because yes, BOP, we see the entrepreneurship through their social exclusion. So we see the entrepreneurship is so important, and the role of the intermediary in the BOP entrepreneurship also very important, mostly provided by the new platform to help them. And so we see the platform enabled or empowered the BOP innovation systems, mediation school and the intermediation school. We see that became more important issues now. And so we see the new roles of the platform in the innovation systems. And the new innovation systems for the hope, I think, at first we see how to build the incentives and the chances for the BOP entrepreneurs. And the second, we see the inclusive arrangements, very important. So the role of the government, how to facilitating the people at the bottom, so important. Need a new institutional arrangement for it, especially to motivating those platforms. And finally, I should say the government, the whole systems of the innovations of the sea should be the people, not the search, but we should care about them. So that's the news. We just we cannot to facilitate things. Thank you for the attention.
I think Professor Wu is again lost, but it was his, yes, Prof.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Wu. There was a little bit of technical difficulty issues of the internet had some issues, Professor Wu had some issues, but I'm sure, Professor Wu will be circulating us the slides, and information is there in the slides, and
sure.
Both Professor Lundvall and Professor Wu, they have been discussing about, the economics of hope, innovations, which will ensure inclusivity, equitability, and sustainability. I mean, that should be, of course, the focus at the end of COVID-19, of course, in the post-COVID world. And there are very interesting papers and works which have been edited by Professor Lundvall, Professor Xiaobo. I would request all the participants, in case you find any difficulty in accessing those sources, you can please write to us, and we'll be sharing the links and the websites where you can find the works which have been written by Professor Lundvall and Professor Xiaobo. I request our discussant, Shagufta, she's joining us from Denmark. So I request her to please discuss both the presentations, and then we will have the session open for question and answers. Shagufta.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Fayaz and the organizers for this session. And I'm extremely honored, and it's my pleasure to be here in the presence of such esteemed professors, and just listen to your presentations and very inspirational talks, and be a discussant is my absolute honor. I would like to thank for the presentations, and yeah, I'd just like to start with saying that it's a very extraordinary situation, and yeah, just for a moment, let me share my screen. I forgot that. Yeah, can you please allow me, Sheikh?
Just a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, you can share now.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I hope it's visible.
Yes, clearly.
Okay, so yes, so I've had my introduction. I won't repeat it again. I'm a PhD student at Aalborg University, and I'm working under the supervision of Professor Lundvall, which is very fortunate of me. So yes, I would just like to start and begin with still the impacts of COVID-19 that the world is experiencing, and and drawing upon the ideas from the very recent presentation by Professor Dosi and Soete in a session on Freeman's legacy, and then obviously drawing upon Professor Lundvall and Professor Wu's presentations. But yeah, just beginning with the economic impacts of COVID, that it's been now demonstrated that it has been less harsh than 2008 crisis, as although it was in the beginning expected that the world economy will be hit very harsh by the impacts. But of course, the negative impact is not equally distributed. And I think it is the common ground for the presentations today as well, that the inequalities have been on the rise, and the pandemic has definitely exacerbated all the inequality that already existed and reinforced some dimensions, and has definitely created more and more exclusion and disadvantages for certain populations. And there have been the impact has been very varied on health of different individuals, as Professor Dosi and Soite's presentation also demonstrated. And even business sector, different companies have experienced it differently. The entire sectors and countries have had different experiences and outcomes, and mostly in the negative way, because of how the economies and how the populations have been influenced by the pandemic and the sickness, and different countries and different sectors and different systems dealing with the pandemic have had to reshuffle and reprioritize their activities. And of course, a large number of people have been put out of work, or have had to change the way they work or educate themselves. So the inequality have definitely been the highlight of the pandemic, and how dealing with these inequalities has become more and more difficult. The labor markets have suffered a lot. The age groups have experienced the pandemic in different way. The older people have had the effects of disease more, and at more risk of being badly influenced by the pandemic. But the younger people in some places not only have had health risks, but also risks in terms of if they are in education bracket, how they are getting educated. If they are in the working age group, then how their work has been affected and how they have been put out of work. And of course, higher education and education provision in general has been suffering a lot. And then one of the areas that I am working with is the gender gaps, where where without a doubt the gender gaps have widened during the pandemic, and especially in the global south, because there are gender gaps already in employment. There are stricter gender roles. Women have had to do more care work. Even with work from home, they have experienced more pressure and more workload. And of course, the family dynamics in certain cultures exacerbate these gender gaps. So it has led to it has led to exclusion and the challenges to inclusive development, as Professor Wu has mentioned. mentioned that inclusive development has become more challenging in this situation. So the COVID-19 specific challenges not only were these, but especially in education in developing countries, as I'm working for the role of universities in developing countries and for the inclusive development in terms of gender equality. So I would just like to give a few reflections on how it has affected, in especially these areas where lockdowns have happened. Schools, colleges, and universities have had to close, and there have been learning losses, which is a demonstrated strand of literature where it's been shown that the learning losses, at least in the last year and a half, have been significant for all the levels of education, and it has definitely created a gap in learning for all the students, not only in higher education but also in the primary and secondary education levels, and then inequality rising from unequal access to education has increased a lot, and a lot of children have been then put out of school. And if the education delivery mode has been turned to online education, there is a big gap in also access to that education, because not everyone has access to the necessary infrastructure in terms of having the devices that they would need to access the education, the online mode of delivery, or the access to internet, and also being in geographically disadvantaged locations also adds to this problem. So there has been a negative impact on all the levels of education. And then, of course, there more than ever before, there is now in highlight the lack of training of teachers and infrastructure that in many places, especially in the global south, not only is there no infrastructure or very little infrastructure to deliver the education, but also the training for the teachers to be able to deliver that teaching, which is going to be online. And it has definitely created a frustration among the students, among the teachers as well, because they are not able to connect to the students as they used to. And then there are insufficient policies to tackle the learning losses. We have seen so far that of course, the governments have had to take the necessary actions that they did to stop the spread of COVID. They have had to do lockdowns. They have had to close down places of work, but it has not really helped with overcoming the problems that are arising. So just looking at the gender gaps, it has definitely widened, especially in the developing countries. And just one reference that I would use would be the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report. In just 2021, they stated that on the current trajectory, it will take on the global level 135 years, almost 135 years to close the gender gap that we have right now in different areas, in education, in health, in political participation, in employment, in labor force participation between men and women. And it's definitely a very unhopeful situation, as we say, that since we are talking about the economics of hope. And there are wide disparities between and within regions and different focus areas, because in some geographical regions, there are still better statistics for gender gaps than in others. And then on the regional level and on the current pace, the gender gap report estimates even worse statistics for, especially in South Asia, where it will take close to 200 years to close these gender gaps, which definitely COVID-19 will lengthen the process. It will not necessarily help in any way. So we have to also deal with these extra challenges, where on the overall level, we are dealing with the exclusion and challenges to inclusive development, as Professor Wu has mentioned. But specifically looking at the gender areas, it's going to be much more difficult. So where should we look? And now I'll draw upon the presentations that have been here. I think Professor Lundvall's remarks have been very, very thorough and very helpful in the sense that we have to look at different aspects and different actors to deal with the challenges that have been arising. So markets haven't been so helpful as he said, and might be helpful in the future with some selective processes of overcoming all the losses. The state has definitely done the tasks to stop the spread, but of course much more active role is needed from the state, and the civil society organizations and civil society role has never been so important, especially in this era when knowledge has become more and more important, and the spread of knowledge and the spread of correct knowledge, as we have seen that the conspiracies against the existence of the pandemic, and also regarding vaccines, that how difficult it has been to vaccinate people in especially the developing countries, where a lot of misinformed misinformed population has been hindering the vaccination process. So I think civil society organizations and civil society role is very, very important in that regard, to vaccinate and secure the populations, because it is not a very local issue. It's not just an issue of global South. It's not just an issue of South Asia or just an issue of developing countries. Everyone has been affected. We have seen that mostly in Europe and North America, the hardest hit countries are those, and then very recently in India. But it's enough for us to see that it's not a local problem, and the solutions need to be equally global and inclusive for this. So there is need for new STI policies for as Dosi and Soite said, that Corona version of inclusion versus exclusion, and of course it has added a new dimension to inclusion and exclusion, especially in terms of access to health and healthcare and vaccines, and also testing facilities, because it hasn't been very helpful not having access to all these facilities. And then of course, as Professor Wu said, that bottom of the pyramid innovations and entrepreneurship for inclusive development is absolutely the necessity of this time. Knowledge needs to be democratized, and it needs to be utilized by the people and through the people who are definitely the beneficiaries of those innovations. And we need to find new ways to solve gender-based inequalities and promote the participation of all genders in all the areas of gender equality. So I think it's my last slide. Just elaborating a little bit more, that we need investments in digital infrastructure, especially in terms of education delivery, that has been very, very unfortunate, that in many developing countries, the students have had to suffer major learning losses just because they cannot go to school physically or go to the universities and cannot attend the lectures. There is need for new hybrid forms of education based on pedagogical insights and digital didactics, which means that new modes of education delivery are needed. There have been OECD work together with Professor Lundvall, where they studied that group studies combined with online delivery have been effective in terms of making the online learning more productive. It can be organized in the form of students in bubbles or groups where they can attend the lectures together, and then they can discuss among themselves and enhance the learning. And then grassroots solutions to problems are definitely needed, where, as Professor Lundvall said, that decolonizing modes of innovation and role of institutions is needed, and it has to be very contextualized and local, where the solutions can address the problems that are present there. And in the end, I think hope is the only way forward, and that's what we have talked about. So I'll thank everyone who has spoken today, and I'll thank you for having me as a discussant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shigufta, for wonderfully summarizing both the presentations and bringing in some new insights. Well, I could see from the audience we have some distinguished professors listening to Professor Bal and Professor Xiaobo. I think I could see Professor Krishna, who is Editor-in-Chief of Science, Technology and Society. Well, Professor Krishna, if you're hearing me, it would be great if you please have any questions, or if you want to intervene, or if you have anything to ask Professor Bal or Professor Xiaobo. I'll start with Professor Krishna. Professor Krishna.
You're able to hear me?
Yes, Prof. Yes, very clearly.
Okay. It was so wonderful to listen to Bal after a very, very long time. Good evening, Bal from Sydney here. It's almost 9 o'clock in the evening. And also it was so wonderful to hear Professor Wu there's very little to disagree with both the speakers, but in terms of China and in terms of the whole inclusive innovation argument given by Wu, you see, if we take the case of China, which has been a most wonderful case in terms of reduction of the poverty and lifting people out of the poverty, and it's been one of the developing countries where millions and millions of people have come out of the poverty, and this has a historical reason, because if we look back in terms of the poverty and inclusive innovation and the kind of the gain that China had is directly related to the whole historical process. The whole town and the village enterprises, which came up in the 70s and the 80s, played a wonderful role in terms of connecting it with the whole agricultural sector in China. And the millions and millions of people who were coming out of the agriculture were absorbed within the town and the village enterprises. And in a decade or a decade and a half, by the 90s, I think most of the town village enterprises got into the whole formal state sector. So that historical factor is very important in terms of the Chinese case, in terms of the reduction of the poverty. I thought I would just make this comment. And well, it was so wonderful to listen to Bal, and particularly his whole idea of how we have to build kind of the civil society groups. And even if we see in the pandemic phase in India, it was the civil society groups which have played a very, very dominant role. And I think it's a wonderful idea which is going to represent the whole democratic process and the democratization of innovation and democratization of the science. I think these were my comments, and thanks Fayaz for inviting me for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Krishna, for these wonderful comments. I have two questions. I think Professor Dhiran from South Africa has two questions for both the speakers. I move to Dr. Dhiran. Dr. Dhiran, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks to all the speakers. My two questions are for Professors Bal and Professor Xiaobo in any order. In a 2006 paper by Professor Shuling Gu and Professor Bal, it was an introduction to a special issue on innovation in China. You talked about endogenous innovation and harmonious development, and you linked that to the ancient Chinese heritage, the Confucian heritage, and you said it might be possible to link this ancient Chinese philosophical tradition with the imperative of endogenous growth. Do you, and endogenous innovation, is that kind of linkage still going on between an ancient past that had a civilization and the modern imperatives of innovation? Is that something that's relevant for inclusive innovation in the post-pandemic world? So that's my first question, and either of you can answer it or both. The second one is more directed to Professor Xiaobo, and do you find the notion of the fourth industrial revolution useful in talking about digital platforms, artificial intelligence, machine learning as the basis for inclusive innovation? And if so, what is the role of secondary innovation there? Because when people talk about these digital platforms, it's really about adoption. So it's on the diffusion end of the spectrum, of the innovation spectrum. But where would secondary innovation fit into AI, machine learning, as far as endogenous capabilities? I hope my questions are relatively clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Dhiran. Yeah, both of the professors can respond. Yes, Professor Bal, you can respond first, and then Professor Xiaobo can respond.
I think Professor Ball first, and I can ask.
Or maybe Professor Bal, you have to turn on the mic.
Here we are. Okay. Let me first give some general comment to Xiaobo Wu's presentation and related to what I tried to say. I mean, I focused very much on the global situation, and Xiaobo Wu, he focused very much on what's taking place inside China. And I mean, I am quite aware of the work you have been doing together with Shuling Gu on how you, with the help of so-called platforms, can include activities and stimulate activities and very peripheral areas. And I also very much agree with the last speaker, was it Dhiran, that no, it was Krishna before that, who said that the most important thing with the Chinese experience is actually the fantastic thing to bring millions of people out of poverty. I mean, there's nothing more inclusive than giving people a job on which they can earn sufficient money to survive and have a reasonably good life. And this is very important. And I recognize that what Xiaobo Wu was talking about was how this can be further developed in the era of artificial intelligence and digital platforms, etc. At the same time, there is a different dimension to this, and this is the enormous concentration of power in privately owned or state-owned corporations. And it's also, I mean, most of people following what's going on in China, I think there is this kind of dilemma that some of the very biggest tech giants, while they can play a very positive role, they can actually begin to compete with public infrastructure at different levels. I mean, the most well-known example, I guess, in the financial area with Alipay, etc. So I think we need to look at this in a dialectic way. We need to see both the inclusive aspect, but we also need to look soberly and seriously on issues of political economy and power. And when we go to the West, I mean, where we have the US digital giants, which are dominating more and more areas all around the world, not only in the US. I mean, this is a really obvious issue. So I wonder if Xiaobo would like to comment on this.
Thank you, Professor Bao. Yeah, I have more questions here, actually. Yeah, I'm happy to addressing something here. You see that in the past more than 40 years since China opened the door, we not just open the door to outside the world, but actually that's open the door for the common people to do something. They can do things freely. That's important. So the question about the first question by Professor Dyron, yeah, mentioned that the Confucianism in China, the tradition. Yeah, actually, I should say that in China, we see the Confucianism is a very, actually, it's a very inclusive philosophy. It's a good tradition in China, because the core of the Confucianism is provide the chances for common peoples to learn something. So that's very important. If you have the chance to learn, you have the capability to do something meaningful. You can earn your money. So that's the basic sense here. And for the people wondering about the IT, especially we see the artificial intelligence, big data, all cloud computing, cloud servicing. Could this help the poor? Yeah, actually in China, we have a lot of cases to see that, such as the farmers in the remote area, in the mountain areas especially. Traditionally, they have the big distance from his location to the main consumer center. So his value in planning something interesting could not be recognized by the people in the demanding sites, in the customer centers. But now with the internet, with the facilities, small facilities, such as the mobile phone. So in China, you see the mobile phone is getting more and more popular. Even in the mountain areas, people can show how they harvest something special to planting something interesting, to attracting the notice from the people in the main cities. So many cities, the people are willing to buy something, but not just willing to buy something, and more experts encouraged to help those people to bettering their way of planning, plants in the rural areas. So in this way, they improve a lot. And for the IT platforms, big IT giants, so recently they have a lot of arguments on them. But actually, when we look at the Alibaba, look at the Taobao, actually they install those facilities in small villages, so facilitating people with the internet, connecting those local people, the village people, to the people in the main cities. So they can manufacture something and sell something. So that's important. In my view, that the new IT could identify people's micro capabilities. Formerly, people's capability can only be recognized when you go through the university education or in the formal employment in the big companies. But now with the internet, people can recognize and acknowledge your micro capabilities in some way, very small contributions you made. You could be awarded, you could be rewarded with the new systems. And also another thing is about the funding, the finance. You see, the financing system in China now facing experiencing the radical change. We are not following the traditional way of the financing. Traditionally, see that if you ask the room, you should have something to have your mortgage or something as a credit. But now the new system, we have the big data system with this platform, they can acknowledge, they can identify your behavior. So they provide the rooms based on your credible behaviors. So currently we could say that very important thing that common people can have the rooms with their good record for your behavior. So that's the important thing, one. And the second thing that they can provide the micro financing, micro funding for common people. So originally couldn't be afforded by the banking systems. So for the traditional banking systems, they cannot provide the finance for the micro firms and even the common people. But now with the so-called ant financing, you see also the platform provided by the Alibaba, and also another company is Tencent. Tencent also provide the micro firm loans to common people. So all those things actually enabled by the new technologies. So with these new technologies, they can help people in the micro way, not just to see the macro way, different. And when I came back to Professor Ball's question about the Chinese innovation system, global view, yeah, but we see that, we're happy to see that our young guys, they're developing their new businesses in Southeast Asia and even in Africa with the internet-based app. My students, actually, they have their business in Africa, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, to provide a platform to provide micro financing services and also provide the transaction platforms for small businesses. So also we could say that the Chinese innovation systems are different from those in developed nations, especially the United States, we see. Mostly they're heading for the high tech. Yeah, see the well-educated people and the talented people. But here we see that a lot of services provided to the common people. So we see much more inclusive. So we could see those things happens and developing very fast. In Africa, you see the mobile phone, the so-called transit, the brand name of the transit. Yeah, that's the typical secondary innovation. They are not so much advanced goods, and also something like the frugal innovations, we see that. But they use the very advanced technology to help the the common people being involved, being included. So there are a lot of things here happens, but we do need to see what's new in the institutional arrangements. So what's the new role of the government should play, and what's the new role of the platforms could play to facilitating these new innovation systems. So that's something new I could have mentioned. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Xiaobo, for explaining it so beautifully. So I'll take one last question. If in fact Shugufta had any questions, I know she has summarized it properly, but maybe if you want to ask any direct question to Professor Paul or Professor Xiaobo, you're most welcome. And or if there is somebody else who had any quick comment or question, please raise your hand or directly turn on your microphone and we'll be able to hear you.
Thank you. I think Professor Wu has made very, very comprehensive remarks. So I don't have questions anymore. Thank you. Someone else can definitely ask.
Hello, Mr. Faiz. I'm having a comment, and it is, I'm very thankful for such wonderful presentations by both the speakers. Professor Lundvall, that you talked about the digital age and how innovations will be driving, productivity and overall growth in the times to come. But I think there is an agreement amongst all the economists in this century that innovation-led growth, this kind of models have to be encouraged. But given the fact that whether products or life cycle of products are concerned, these are going to be very short. If we keep in mind the pace with which innovations have been taking place and how, the business climate is constantly evolving. Therefore, I think it's very essential that standards for innovations need to be set in the beginning itself, so that, I'm to say that the strategies to support and to adopt in conformation with the international standards, so that there can be more, globalization. The whole world, we were moving towards globalization prior to this COVID, but as you very well said, that now we are moving towards deglobalizations, and there has to be grassroots innovators which need to be encouraged. But for that, I think the whole, the robust, promotion, management of innovations, these are indispensable for sustained productivity enhancement in the times to come, which will be driving, economic growth. Hopefully, I'm able to convey what I wanted to say, because I feel that the standards need to be set in the beginning itself, so that, whatever problems we have faced earlier can be countered right now. At least in the developing countries, I'm speaking from the perspective of, developing countries, because most of the time developing global South has suffered because of lack of standardizations. So I think even for innovations, the standard need to be set. The procedures, the processes need to be set in the beginning itself.
All right. Yes, Professor Bal.
I think standards are one important aspect of all kind of innovation processes, and perhaps even more so when it comes to new areas like information, digital services, how to apply artificial intelligence, etc. And but I must confess, I'm not really an expert on how this is related to the situation in developing countries. I know that there is a tension between different methods to develop standards, between some areas where it's primarily driven by private companies, and other areas where there is a collaboration between states. But probably Seema, she knows much more about all this than I do, so I will not say any more. Thank you.
Professor Wu would like to respond to the issue of standards and innovations in the...
Okay. I would like to mention in that when we tracing back to the root of the innovation, we see we should acknowledge the definition made by Professor Schumpeter 110 years ago. Yeah, and that means people making something new or in a new way to make something products or service, and those products and the services being acknowledged by the customers. So that's the original definition of the innovation. But actually, I would like to say that for developing nations, the definition of the innovation might be more broad. Yeah, how to use it to make something new. So not so structurally defined by the science technology, or we say the science-based technology. And a lot of technologies, especially in developing nations, are not the science-based technology. That's some traditional technologies also making the innovation, make the innovations. So that's my personal view, I think. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bal, Professor Xiaobo. We have only 3 minutes left. So if there is any quick comment or question from any of the professors or the participants, you're most welcome to raise your hand or just turn on your mic and please put across your question. Well, I think we are running out of time. But just like in conclusion, I would say we have 4. Diran has raised his hand. Yes, Diran, please.
No, I was just clapping.
Oh, okay. So
thank you.
Thank you. So, we have these 4 important innovation perspectives which are emerging. One is the harmonious innovation system, which Professor Xiaobo has been advocating. That inclusion is at the heart of it. And then we have the economics of hope, the title of the book by Professor Lundvall, one of the pioneers in innovation studies. He has been very, interested, and he's very keen in nurturing an innovation system which will impact all positively. And then creating alternatives which will be sustainable and equitable and inclusive. And recently we have 2 more innovation concepts. One is proposed by Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who was working with the United Nations and was at the forefront of conceptualizing these SDGs. He has proposed this compassionate innovation system, which of course talks about, wealth, equity, and prosperity for all. And I was reading another book by Professor Jeswa Gans. It's an MIT publication. He's arguing, before pandemics, the book was issued. He's talking about Promethean innovation systems, where we have these Greek gods who would steal fire from God for the greater benefit of whole humanity. I think given the crisis which we are battling collectively, and we have seen, as Shugupta pointed out, the issue of vaccines between the global south and global north countries, and the access of other important medicines. I think we require those Promethean innovators, which will create inclusion, at least in terms of new innovation systems, which we will be debating in post-COVID-19. So I'm really thankful to Professor Bal, Professor Xiaobo, Dr. Shagupta. I know you're very busy and you've agreed to join for this public discussion. I think this will be our last session for the debates which we started last year. This is the 11th of the sessions, basically revolving around the themes of rethinking innovations, governments, states, incentives within the broader innovation framework. And we will be having our workshop in China for the people who have contributed to the special issue of STS. And then we will have a special issue coming up in March 2020. And all the contributors who participated in that theme, they have collectively agreed that there will be an open access book form so that it will be accessible to all with different perspectives. So I am really grateful to Professor Bal, Professor Xiaobo, Dr. Shagupta, and all the participants who joined this wonderful session. I think it's time to end the meeting here. If Professor Bal or Professor Xiaobo have any quick comment, so we'll end the meeting with their comments. Thank you very much. Okay, so we end the meeting here. Professor Bal, would you like to say something or? Okay. You had to unmute Professor Bal. Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. I just want to thank you, Sheikh, for doing this. It's a positive example of what I call globalization from below, that you connect people from different parts of the world. I think that's never been more important than it is now, that people do understand what's going on in other parts of the world. There have never been so much, I don't know, never, but it's a lot of narrow nationalism going on and a lot of prejudice of what's taking place outside your own country. So please keep doing this great work, Sheikh. Thank you very much. And it was a great pleasure to see Xiaobo in good shape and Shagufta as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bal. Professor Xiaobo, any last comment so that we will end the meeting?
Thank you so much, Professor Bal. One comment, I should say that the COVID-19 is not just a stress test, but it's also even more seriously as a test for the human's hope, Actually, we share the same destiny worldwide. So in my view, that the inclusive development is the core for our hope for the better world. Yeah. So I think, especially for our academia people, we should look at those excluded issues and make this world more inclusive. Yeah, that's my words. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I should mention that I'm so proud of Psych Faiz. You're brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Xiaobo. Thank you, Bal. Thank you, Shagufta, and all participants. So we have to end the meeting here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, Prof.
Thank you.